Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tommy Duncan. It is Wednesday, August the 6th, 2025. And if it is Wednesday night, it is definitely Black Men Speak. Welcome to the most fascinating show with news from the markets, the community, and of course, international news. So we want to thank you for joining us this evening. Do, of course, stay in prayers for my good friend and co-host, J.R. Stewart, who is taking some time off to address some health-related issues, but we expect him to be back hopefully pretty soon. For our prayer warriors out there, make sure you give a shout out to the master. With all that being said, we are here, TD3, and we have got a lot to unpack tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've not done so already, make sure that you subscribe to Black Men Speak. Like tonight's show because we've got a lot of great information to share with you tonight. And, of course, share this information with somebody who needs it because, quite frankly, we need to be informed, and it needs to be our news, our platforms, so we can ensure that we're hearing our voice. So let's go ahead and get started tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to, of course, join us on our chat line, give us a shout out, holler, let us know that you're there, and give us your thoughts on some of the stories that we're going to be sharing with you tonight. Any questions that you might have that we can address. I already got cousin Audrey K on the chat line. I want to thank her for joining us this evening and expect to hear from her. Anyone else, feel free to join. So let's go ahead and get started with a little business news, a segment that we have added over the last month or so. For those of you who are watching your dollars and cents, you need to know what's going on in the business and in markets so you can make sure that you're making your fair share of that money. So let's go ahead and get started. So in stocks and in the overall economy, overall U.S. stocks edged higher today while building from major losses from last Friday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose $81 to 44,193. The S&P climbed $45 to $6,345. And the tech-heavy NASDAQ jumped $252 today to $21,169. Now, let's go ahead and talk about some companies who are making some news today. Apple stock, whose stock price has dipped 17% year to date. That means being since January the 1st, rose today by 5% on news that CEO Tim Cook will be at the White House to announce a new $100 billion investment in domestic manufacturing. The tech giant previously announced $500 billion investment in the U.S. over the next 4 years as it looks to avoid tariffs on its products. And we know what that looks like, of course, tariffs that have been threatened by the White House. Now, on the back of that trip, Donald announced today that he will implement a 100% tariff on semiconductors manufactured overseas unless the companies have committed to build in the United States. The White House made an announcement during a press event, of course, while CEO Tim Cook was there, saying that if you are building in the United States or have committed to build without question, then there's going to be no charge. Otherwise, no tariffs. But otherwise, the White House is going to implement those tariffs. But, as we have seen over the last several months, these tariff threats that have started since April, they go back and forth. You wake up on one side of the bed, you decide that you're going to initiate a 25, 50, 75% tariff. The next day, he decides he's going to kick the can for another month or so. So we'll see what happens here. But the reason that this is important, ladies and gentlemen, especially for those of you who might have shares in chip stocks, is that the market is going to respond to this. And this is how the market is being manipulated. So for those chip manufacturers, those companies that are buying their chips from overseas and manufacturing it in product, your share prices are going to probably be affected by it, which includes mine, because I have shares in multiple companies that buy chips from overseas, including Apple. So with that being said, you have to learn how to manage your portfolio based upon where the country is going. And we understand what's happening thus far. But with all that being said, make sure you understand where the business is going. Don't make emotional decisions. Don't get too excited. If you're in the right company stocks, it's just a matter of time before things blow over. And I think the market is kind of adjusting to the fact that these announcements are going to be made on X, or these announcements are going to be made on the Truth social media platform. And you have to be willing to really uh, stay the course. Because if you're in a good stock with a company that is in the top of its market, long term, you're going to end up winning. Anyway, let's go to a couple of other companies. Entertainment giant Disney beat Wall Street estimates on strong theme park and video streaming services revenue, but shares still fell amid declines on its television business. Disney also announced a deal to buy media assets from the National Football League. And for those of you who are fast food mavens, McDonald's stock rose today after the company reversed its U.S. sales revenue slump. And Uber, for you Uberites out there, announced strong revenue results along with a $20 billion stock buyback program. And so this is the statement that I'm going to make, folks. We are an economy and a country that is driven by consumer spending. 75% of our gross domestic product is driven by consumer sales. So for those of us who buy Nike shoes or Apple products, go to McDonald's. I don't do it. I can't eat McDonald's food. But anyone who has something in their house from a consumer products company, or anyone, whether it's a restaurant, really what you should be doing, making sure that you're making money off of them, because surely they are making money off of you. So if you've got 2, 3, 10, for some people, 20 pair of Nikes in your closet, is there a good reason that you don't have Nike stock? I'm not saying it's the best stock in the world to buy, but is there a good reason that you don't have Nike stock within your portfolio? They're making money off you. You should be making money off of them. I have Apple products in my household. I have some shares of Apple stock. Just saying. Just saying. Okay, let's talk about a little bit more business news before we move on. Google, the number one, I won't call it future de facto, but current de facto browser company, among other things, is keeping its anti-DEI narrative alive by removing more than 50 DEI-focused groups from its list of organizations that the company provides funding to. A new report from tech watchdog organization The Tech Transparency Project reveals Google removed a total of 214 groups from its funding list, with 58 related to DEI. By bowing down to President Trump's anti-diversity executive order, the tech conglomerate dropped groups with mission statements including words such as diversity, equity, inclusion, race, activism, and women. Some organizations dropped from the list include African American Community Service Agency, which goal is to empower all Black and historically excluded communities. The Latino Leadership Alliance, dedicated to race equity affecting the Latino community. And En route, which curates out-of-school experiences for the children of immigrants. After Donald's executive order, Google's chief people officer, Fiona Kachoni, alerted employees that the company would end its DEI-related hiring aspirational goals due to federal requirements and Google's classification as a federal contractor. Google stood behind the announcement by removing language referring to underrepresented groups from the grant website. While Silicon Valley and other industries have stood beside DEI programs to rid bias in hiring and curate fair practicing in the workplace, diversity advocates have pointed the blame not only at the Trump administration for its anti-DEI switch up, but the Supreme Court as well, who in 2023 decided to end affirmative action in college admissions processes, following threats from conservative groups. At the end of the day, folks, it comes down to money. And the reason that these companies are backing off of trying to distribute opportunities in contracting, hiring practices, and overall business opportunity is because a lot of these companies have federal contracts or receive money from the federal government. And of course, we currently have someone occupying the White House who has egregiously and unapologetically held back funds from not only commercial institutions, some of these companies we've just talked about today and in the past, but also from higher education institutions. And I mean esteemed higher education institutions like, of course, the Yales of the world, otherwise being some of the most esteemed higher education institutions. If you don't go kiss the ring, your money's getting yanked. There's an alternative to that, but you have to be disciplined, you have to be organized, and you have to be willing to think long term on these things. All that being said, what I'm talking to the average person about today with the Google announcement, and I knew Google was going this way a long time ago, but this is just kind of the latest. And I do have some Google shares as well. Have done pretty well with Google over the years. However, what we have discovered within the last 6 months or so, Target in particular, is that if you are organized, if you are focused, and if you can unify a large enough group of people, you can make a difference. Target is still yelping from the amount of money that it's lost in the market. And Google, it is at the top of its game right now among its competition. However, what if a large enough group of people decide, you know what, you don't want to do business with us, we don't want to do business with you, and you just pulled your shares out and decided to support businesses that support your community or that support you? It's only common sense. I have no qualms with other folks vying for their interests. However, charity begins at home. Why wouldn't you do the same? We can talk about that a little bit later, but at the end of the day, that's what it comes right down to. You have to watch the money. Everything that you see going on in the news, whether you're talking about public or private sector, always follow the money. Let's go ahead and move forward, folks. There was something else that is in a follow-up to a conversation that we had recently. Federal Reserve Governor Adriana Kugler announced her resignation last week, giving the White House the opportunity to appoint a new member of the central bank's board earlier than he had expected to. It is quite interesting politics. The Donald could potentially choose from a pool of potential successors to Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who he's been threatening to fire. A Trump-appointed replacement could tilt the Federal Reserve further towards rate cuts in the near future, which is probably going to happen anyway. I mean, we're already in August. We only have a few months left in the year. So a rate cut is more than likely going to happen unless something very extraordinary happens, which we'll discuss in a few. Announcing Powell's predecessor before the end of his term could create some tension and complicate policy communications. However, there's nothing that we can't expect from the current president. All that being said, Powell's term as chair ends in May 2026, but the Donald choice for Kugler's open spot may well be the person he picks as the next Fed chair. Who knows? Perhaps the world's most important economic policy making job, that is the Fed chairman. So this is interesting, and we're watching this, folks, and it is important because it's economic news. Monetary, I mean, the Fed, for those of you who are not familiar with it, of course, controls the direction of interest rates, how much money is going to put into circulation, and ultimately can affect the economy. How is that? We're in an economy right now that, you know, most folks say is stable, but people are seeing some cracks in the economy. For those of you who've not been watching the news, kind of the so-called chief of the Bureau of Labor Statistics was fired because she announced the news, which is that there were job losses in the market, and someone on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue did not like that. So they fired her, of course, accused her of not telling the truth or cooking the books, which we find pretty interesting, given some of the statements that he's made in the past that don't have a very high correlation with the facts. All that being said is that it's going to be some interesting times coming ahead, and this will be a harbinger of what's going to be happening next year in 2026 in terms of the potential direction of the Fed. So with that being said, looks like we've got Brother Gregory Harrington on the chat line. I want to thank him for joining us. Says guilty, plenty Nike and Jordans and no stock from Nike. Bro, come on now. Come on, Greg. All right. I know you're going to go ahead and add, well, you know what? For what it's worth, over the long term, Nike is the big dog in the house. So we cool. We're going to get it there. All right. Let's continue to move forward with our stories. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, this is a follow-up story to something that we have been tracking for some months now. I don't want to say a happy ending, but what some would consider to be justice. Maxwell Anderson, 33, pictured to your left, was sentenced to life in prison without parole last Friday for the murder and dismemberment of 19-year-old Sade Richardson, a Milwaukee student whose remains were discovered across Wisconsin and Illinois. Yes, across 2 states, following a first date with Anderson in April of 2024. Anderson was found guilty on charges including first-degree intentional homicide, mutilating a corpse, arson of property, and hiding a corpse. Prosecutors said Robinson met Anderson on April the 1st, 2024 at the Twisted Fisherman Seafood Restaurant. She was last seen alive at his residence. We're going to have to talk about this. She was last seen alive at his residence. She was murdered after the first date. The next day, her torched vehicle was found and surveillance footage placed Anderson at the scene. He was arrested 2 days later. In the weeks that followed, investigators recovered Robinson's dismembered remains from various locations. Her father, Carlos Robinson, that is Sade Robinson's father, stated, "He deserves the punishment that he gave to my daughter. Everything that he did to her should be done to him. That would be justice. I don't feel like he should be allowed to walk around and breathe air. The moment he did what he did, he lost that." Anderson maintained his innocence, offering condolences and claiming he was framed by an unknown assailant. However, Judge Laura Crivello rejected his claim, stating, "I have to look at whether you're remorseful, and I don't think you're remorseful in any way." So we'll continue to track this. Mixed emotions here. It is good to know that the system has done what it has done, because this man should not see the light of day for the rest of his life. No questions asked. And in terms of the statement from her father, I definitely understand that. I cannot begin to imagine how you feel with what has happened to your daughter. On the other side, ladies, this was a first date. She was murdered. Parts of her body was strewn around 2 states. We've got to learn. And I understand we live in the age of immediate gratification. I understand we live in the age of social media. I understand we live in the age of, I have a right to do what I want with my time and my body, or whatever that happens to look like. This is catastrophic. This is devastating. I just come from a different generation where we take a little time to vet someone before we go to someone's house. Don't get me wrong. She did not deserve this by any stretch of the imagination. But there is someone else out there who this could potentially happen to. There is someone else out there who this could potentially happen to. Female or male. She happened to be 19 years old. She was a very young lady, had her entire life ahead of her. That has been taken away from her. the future has been taken away from their parents because of the loss of their lovely daughter. Doubt that he will be murdered and dismembered and spread across 2 states, but he will be spending a lot of time behind bars, and we'll continue to track this story as we move forward. So again, our prayers and condolences to the Robinson family at the loss that they are having to live through for the rest of our lives, because you don't get over something like this. The sheer gravity of what has happened. Very sad. We're glad he's going to prison for the rest of his life. We have to make sure that that happens. Let's move now to a few stories in sports. We'll move that up a little bit further, or a little bit up further in the show tonight. A couple of interesting stories I'm going to get through. We've got to take responsibility for our actions. And this is going to be an interesting story with someone that practically everybody in the world knows. Olympic gold medalist Sade Richardson was recently arrested over the weekend for allegedly assaulting her boyfriend, fellow sprinter Christian Coleman, who many of you know if you keep up with track and the Olympics. She was arrested at the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Richardson was detained by law enforcement on a 4th-degree domestic violence offense and was booked into the South Correctional Entity in Des Moines, Washington. She was released Monday thereafter. Per the report, an officer at the airport was notified by a TSA supervisor of a domestic disturbance. Surveillance footage of the alleged incident shows Richardson grabbing Coleman's backpack and yanking it away. As Coleman attempted to step around her, Richardson got in Coleman's way. She then shoved Coleman into a wall. The report states that Richardson appeared to throw an item at Coleman, which may have been headphones or something else. Following the incident, Coleman declined to press charges. He declined to press charges. On Sunday, August the 3rd, Coleman came out in support of Richardson, his girlfriend, as he attempted to put the incident behind him. Although she has an automatic berth in the 100-meter dash in the defending world championship coming up this fall, she failed to qualify for the 200-meter at the World Championships in September by 100th of a second. This is a rollaway story, which I found interesting because of a couple of things. And we actually have another story as well. When you have a brand, when you have people who are in your corner, when you have people who are supporting you, when you have people who are sponsoring you, and we have people who are backing you, you really have to watch your step. And we are human beings, and we are all fallible. We are, as human beings, emotional. But you have to be cognizant and learn to manage how you are moving in the world, because Sade Richardson is a recognized brand in sports, in track in particular. She is an Olympic gold medalist. She's already had some issues in the past with some behavioral things, which I won't go back into, that put her at risk, that kept her out of competition so that she can compete at the highest level. And she is from Oak Cliff, Dallas, Texas. So she's from the hood, same hood I'm from. So what I'm going to share and offer is this. Things happen, and I don't know what Christian may have done that warranted her snagging his bags, shoving him into a wall, getting into a fight with him. The old folks used to say there's a time and a place for everything. And with this being her man and her being his woman, you can get the point across without putting yourself at risk. What do I mean by that? Richardson has a lot of people behind her, including Nike. She has a 5-year, $20 million contract with Nike. Not a small amount of money, especially in track and field that runs through 2028. Sprite also has her. Sprite actually has endorsed her as the first female athlete signed by Sprite to a contract, and Powerade. She is a brand ambassador, joining a campaign with renowned tennis great Venus Williams. And so what you have to understand is the things that you do, and this is what the old folks used to tell us, what our parents and grandparents used to tell, what you say and what you do does not only affect you, it affects the people that you're around, it affects your family, your friends. So you have to be very careful, and especially when you are in the public eye. And someone like Sade Richardson is in the public eye, just like Christian Coleman. But she has a bigger brand than he does. I'm pretty sure that since he did not file charges, this will go away pretty quickly. But for those of us who are out there who've got a lot of life ahead of us, or for those of us out there who, we've been around the track a couple of times, you have to be careful by the way you walk, and especially in the public eye, because you do have the media looking at you all the time. And if you happen to be kissed by nature's son, you have more of the media and more of a target on your back than anyone else. I do wish her and Christian Coleman the best of luck. And being from Oak Cliff, we have to carry ourselves in a certain way. We have to be mature. She is 25 years old, which means she is still young in the eyes of many people, but she is mature enough, having gone through what she has gone through, in order to understand that sometimes you have to restrain yourself. Because the people who look up to you, because she is a role model, the people who count on you, because you do have influence on other people, the people who are investing in you, because there are sponsors out there who are giving her millions of dollars, can yank that away at any time. That $20 million, as we have found with some other folks, can be gone at any time, because in most of these contracts now, guess what happens? They have a conduct clause in your contract. So if you act a fool, your change could get real strange real quickly. I do hope she does well at the upcoming World Championships. I wish her the best. I hope she does well. We have to continue to put our arms around her, pray for her, but you have to take responsibility and ownership for your actions. Let's keep it moving forward, and let's mature, and let's go ahead and move forward. And we will go ahead and move on to our next article. We got a couple of other folks that we will acknowledge in the chat room. Miss Marion Square. I want to thank her for joining us this evening. Did you just ask what the dude did to her to warrant her behavior? There isn't anything that he could do to warrant that behavior in a public setting, because at the end of the day, he could have said something or done something that may have pissed her off, but she's got big money on the line. She's got sponsorships on the line. She's got millions of young girls around the world that she influences who are watching her every step. So again, I'm not saying that he even did anything to warrant her behavior. But what I will do is applaud Christian Coleman, because I know some dudes who they would have responded a little bit differently. They would have responded a little bit differently to someone shoving them into the wall. And there are some guys who are spending time in jail right now for probably something comparable, maybe less than what happened. I will applaud him for his maturity in not responding in kind, because I guarantee you it would have been a lot worse for him if he would have shoved her. I'm talking to my young brothers now. I'm talking to my older brothers now. It would have likely been a lot worse for him if he would have responded in kind to her after she shoved him, after she yanked whatever she did from him. We have to learn from other people's lessons. All right, emotional, mature intelligence always prevails. Yes, and that is from some mother wisdom from cousin Audrey K. I want to thank you for that, and continue to be an influence on the women of the next generation that you influence. Now, For those of you who are football fans, those for you are NFL fans, I know you know this story, and we got to talk about it for a couple of minutes. Yes, we know last week, after our last show, Micah Parsons, the all-pro edge rusher, that is defensive end for the Dallas Cowboys, has officially submitted a trade request to Stephen Jones of the Dallas Cowboys to trade him. Parsons posted on social media that he is requesting a trade after negotiations with the Cowboys on his new contract have grown contentious, basically saying, I no longer want to play for the Dallas Cowboys. My trade request has been submitted to Stephen Jones personally. Yes, I want to be here. I did everything I could to show I wanted to be a Cowboy and to wear that star on my helmet. I wanted to play in front of the best fans in sports and make this America's team once again. There's a story there. The team my pops and I grew up cheering for way up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, a state that has, by the way, the Philadelphia Eagles and Pittsburgh Steelers. But they were a Cowboys fan. Unfortunately, I no longer want to be here. Parsons wrote in a statement shared on social media, I no longer want to be held into closed-door negotiations with my agent presence. I no longer want shots taken at me for getting injured while playing it on the line for the organizations, our fans, and my teammates. I no longer want narratives created and spread to the media about me. On August the 2nd, OJ, some call owner Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner, gave his first public comments about Parsons' trade request and didn't seem fazed, saying, I would say to our fans, don't lose any sleep over this. He went on to say that he's been negotiating in good faith and has offered Parsons a lucrative contract, which I find interesting because when new contracts are tendered on the table, people find out real quickly because it is a negotiation. It is truly a negotiation. And according to ESPN's Adam Schefter, who is an insider in sports and very close to what's happening across the league in the NFL, the Cowboys, he stated, have not made Parsons a formal offer, contradicting Jones's remarks that contract talks have progressed. They haven't even submitted a contract proposal, Schefter stated on a sports show First Take on July the 2024. In the final year of his contract, Parsons will make $24 million. A lot of money, a whole lot of money to the average person. The four-time Pro Bowler is seeking $40 million plus annually from the Cowboys, given his talent level. What does that mean, and why would he be asking for $40 million? Well, for those of you who watch football, for those of you who are Cowboys fans, you already know why he's asking for $40 million. Two people, Myles Garrett of the Cleveland Browns and TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They happen to be with organizations who take care of their players. Well, not particularly the Browns, because Myles Garrett actually had to threaten that he wasn't coming in until he got his money, until he got his change. He got $40 million both. Myles Garrett went to my alma mater, Texas A&M, and TJ Watt got somewhere in the range of $40 million. For those of you who don't know, don't watch football, Micah Parsons is a top 3. Some might say top 5 at worst edge rusher in the NFL. So what he's asking for is parity. Now, this is the deal. He still has a year left on his contract, but what he wants is an extension. When he says he wants to play for the Cowboys, he wants to be a Cowboy, what that means is I have been a Cowboy fan all of my life, and so is my family. I'm with the Cowboys. I want to stay with the Cowboys at that time, and ideally want to retire from the Cowboys. This is the problem. They have an owner who I've had many fun and contentious conversations with my good friend and co-host J.R. Stewart about, is only concerned about one thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's the money. The Cowboys have been the most valuable franchise in the world for decades. However, there is something that most people who play football are gunning for, and that's a Super Bowl. And Jerry may not care about Super Bowls, quite frankly. Jerry may not care about Super Bowls. I understand. He wants complete control and he wants the money. So as long as he's making billions upon billions of dollars, I don't think he cares about a Super Bowl. But there is no one in the realm of any sport, football, basketball, baseball, soccer, who play just to play. And they make good money in the NFL. However, they want to reach the pinnacle of success. They want a Super Bowl. There is no great player or even not so great player in the history of the sport who does not want the world trophy. And for the NFL, that's a Super Bowl called the Lombardi Trophy. So for those of you who watch us week to week, you probably already know that Jimmy and I don't have a formal bet, but we had a conversation. He was, of course, of the opinion that the Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl. I was of the opinion, as I have been for more than a decade and a half, Cowboys are not going to another Super Bowl while Jerry is running and controlling things. I say while he's in a pine box. The Cowboys are not going to the Super Bowl until Jerry's in the pine box. I stand on that. Why do I stand on that? He's not good for the culture. The Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls. Why? Because of the partnership between Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson, at that time, the best coach in the NFL, and arguably one of the best coaches in the history of the game, who Jerry fired because, quite frankly, he wasn't getting enough attention and did not like the attention that Jimmy Johnson was getting. They got into a conversation, and it was between players and coaches. And Jerry's the owner of the team. He has every right to feel that he should be a part of any conversation. But he felt that Jimmy upstaged him, and he fired him the next day. Of course, Barry Switzer was hired after that, and basically the team that they had was so good that even Barry, who is not a great coach by any stretch of the imagination, from a NFL point of view, got a Super Bowl ring because of what was left from Jimmy Johnson's regime and what he put together. However, going back to my original point, this is a recurring story. Last year was CeeDee Lamb, top 3 receiver in the NFL, threatened to hold out. And yes, it did impact the season last year. Cowboys didn't do any better last year than they've done for the last 25 years. 2 seasons ago, it was Dak Prescott. He held out. He did not hold out. He had to wait on his contract, wait on his money. And anybody may have their opinions about Dak Prescott as a quarterback, how good he is, if he's going to ever take him to the Super Bowl. I say it doesn't matter. Because again, as long as Jerry is heavily involved and is a distraction to the team, doesn't matter how good Dak is or anybody else is. Now, what I will tell you is this much. Tony Romo did not have to wait on his contract. Fancy that. Micah Parsons has to wait. CeeDee Lamb had to wait. Dak Prescott had to wait. For those of you who've been around and watching the Cowboys long enough, you may remember that Emmitt Smith had to wait. Held out. Took 2 games into the regular season after they had won a Super Bowl before Jerry would give him a new agreement. But for whatever reason, Tony Romo did not have to wait on his money. Troy Aikman did not have to wait on his new contract. Kind of coincidental, huh? Dak is playing the most important position on the team, quarterback. May not be considered to be the best player on the team, but he's on the most important position on the team. All that being said, Micah, I hate to tell you this, very low odds you're going to get traded because you're dealing with a man who looks at his team, as we found out a few years ago, like a plantation. He has a lot of money to spend. He has a lot of contract money to spend out. But he operates like a plantation. We found that out, of course, during the 45 regime where the occupant of the White House at that time, during the, of course, fallout of many murders on the streets of brothers by law enforcement, players in the NFL decided to take a knee to stand in silent protest against what was happening across the country. And we found out who Jerry was then. I don't know that that has particularly changed now. He has the right to run his organization anytime, any way that he wants to. But at the end of the day, we know who he is. And I wish you the best, Micah. We don't know if this is a negotiating tactic on your part or if you're just done. Most of the players in the NFL, if we have found, whose contracts are not guaranteed, don't have the discipline financially or emotionally to organize and collaborate to get what they want. And so there's a very good likelihood that you will be paying this year at whatever Jerry decides to put out there. But it's a shame that a player of your magnitude, who's one of the best players in the league right now, has to wait, which is an absolute no-brainer. This man should have been paid. And what makes it even worse is that Jerry's going to pay significantly more than what he had to if he just would have gotten the contract done during the offseason earlier this year and before all of these other contracts came out. All that being said, it's his money. He can spend it any way he wants to. I wish you the best. And if you end up going someplace in the future, I wouldn't blame you. We'll see what happens. All right, folks, one more sports story and we'll be at it. We've got Miss Tanya on the chat line. Want to thank you for joining us this evening. Hey, y'all. We've got another story that is not a follow-up story, but a new evolution in the saga of another athlete or former athlete in sports that we've been talking about recently as well. And I really hate to hear this, but it has happened again. I'm pretty sure everybody has seen this, but Hall of Fame NFL player Shannon Sharpe is facing a new $20 million lawsuit after being accused of defamation by one Jimalita Tillman, a Chicago native who went viral after sharing an intimate moment with Usher at a concert in April. Tillman is suing Sharpe, Chad Johnson, his co-host, his Nightcap podcast co-host, and the production company Shay Shay Media, accusing all parties of spreading a false narrative about her marital status. On April the 2nd, she states, I participated in a fan engagement moment at a Usher Raymond concert where I interacted with the artist as a selected audience member. Following this event, the defendants made and disseminated false and defamatory statements that I was married and that my husband was filing for divorce due to my participation in this audience experience. I am not married, nor am I currently going through a divorce. The filing continued. Tillman stated that the false statements made on Sharpe's podcast have caused significant harm to her character and reputation. She is reportedly seeking $20 million in damages. The former First Take co-host, Shannon Sharpe, also said that he profusely apologized to his older brother, Sterling Sharpe, also now a Hall of Famer, over the incident because he didn't want it to be a distraction to what should have been Sterling's time to stand amongst his cohorts in getting one of the most prized awards in football history. In April, Sharpe, as we have reported, was also named a civil lawsuit filed in Nevada, alleging he had committed assault to another young lady. When the suit became public, Sharpe announced that he was taking time away from his duties at ESPN. What we have also found, of course, is that he was in essence fired from ESPN after the fact. Unfortunately, it was just a little bit too much heat for ESPN or association with him. Jimalita, who worked as a global director of the Harold Washington Cultural Center, alleges that she initially asked for the clip to be taken down and to be issued a public apology paired with a retraction, but her requests were ignored. She further claims that the allegations have made their way into her professional life as an executive and homeschooling advocate. Every time I enter a meeting for funding, for programming and activations, it comes up. I'm tired of being the punchline when it comes to that aspect. Tillman doesn't want to stop at the Chicago courts and intends to take the case to Congress if she has to. So I'd like to hear what people have to say about this incident, because this is a pretty interesting one. I hate that this is happening again for Shannon, even though I have my opinions about the last settlement, which I believe is somewhere around $23 million that he had to pay to an OnlyFans model for allegations of assault in order to make it go away. I think she originally filed a $10 million lawsuit. The attorney, her attorney, pushed her to ask for $50 million. They settled someplace in between. Folks, she wants $20 million for defamation of character because he and Chad Ochocinco erroneously stated that her husband was going to divorce her over something that looked like this. I'm not going to go to the video because it takes too much time. Some of you are Usher Raymond fans and probably know kind of what goes on at his concerts. And so he kind of does these things where he has cherries and does these things with cherries and kind of flirts with the ladies. And if you haven't already seen the video, you can probably find it because it's gone viral a long time ago. And so this actually happened before the statements were made on, of course, Sharpe's and Ochocinco's podcast. All that being said, if you've seen the video, she looks like she's in heat. She's having a good time. She's at a concert, which is okay. And I guess she took exception to them purporting that her husband, which she did not have, was going to divorce her, which is one thing. Okay, she took exception to that. But asking for $20 million for defamation of character, and this is viral. Everybody knows about this. There are a lot of other people who saw this video, but Shannon has bigger pockets. Ochocinco has bigger pockets. Ocho holds on to his money, self-proclaimed, very frugal. This is unfortunate for, as we call Unc. He calls himself Unc. And I think it's very unfortunate for this young lady as well, because I'm not going to say she put herself in this position, but I will say that if she wanted the attention, she got the attention of Shannon Sharpe. And I think that's what she wanted. She wanted attention. She wants a lot of money just for someone saying that her husband is going to divorce her and she ain't married. I don't really remember the last time somebody got paid for someone incidentally saying that you were married and their husband was going to divorce him. Otherwise, we'd have a lot of money flying around all over the place. So for those of you who've seen this video, let me know what you got to say about this. It sounds like she's seeking some attention. She already got some attention because her video went viral on the concert. But at the end of the day, I don't think she's going to make very much off of this because at the end of the day, she's not married. And I don't know if this was intentional, but it'll be interesting to see what this turns out to. Jay James, she looks like she was in heat. Wow, that was disrespectful. Call it what you want. Look at the video and you can see what you say herself. And so all that being said is we will continue to track this. And I didn't mean to offend anyone at all by saying she was in heat. It was just my observation because she did. So, okay, I will say she looked like she was enjoying herself. She was enjoying herself a whole lot. All right, let's go to international news. This is ongoing saga indirectly related to other stories that we have been capturing in the past, related to the trauma that's going on in Haiti. The United Nations Integrated Office in Haiti has described the human rights situation in Haiti as extremely worrying. That's pretty politically correct. Extremely worrying, reporting a surge in armed violence, human rights abuses, and population displacement during the second quarter of 2025. According to the agency, criminal groups have not only maintained their grip on the capital, Port-au-Prince, but have also expanded and intensified attacks in other regions. Between April the 1st and June the 30th, 2025, about 3 months, at least 1,520 people were killed and 609 injured due to armed violence. Most of the casualties occurred in Port-au-Prince metropolitan area. The report also documented 185 kidnappings and 628 victims of sexual violence during the same period. Criminal groups were responsible for over 24% of the total casualties, which the UN documenting widespread use of murders, gang rapes, kidnapping, sexual slavery, and child exploitations as tools of control. The report has also raised concerns about the role of security forces, stating that 64% of the people killed or injured were affected during operations against criminal groups. It is extremely bad. It has been extremely bad in Haiti for several years. More than a third of these casualties resulted from drone strikes using explosives. At least 15% of the victims were civilians unaffiliated with gangs, killed or injured in their homes or on the streets. Additionally, 12% of the casualties were linked to violence attributed to self-defense groups and civilians involved in the Barkhane movement, which targets suspected gang members and collaborators. The White House claimed genocide in South Africa a few months ago and used taxpayer money to import several families to the United States from South Africa. When white farmers in South Africa themselves told the White House there was no genocide in South Africa and you need to leave our affairs alone. Pictures that the Donald showed of President Ramaphosa of South Africa were actually of Africans in Central Africa, not of white farmers who were being murdered by Black Africans. Yet, there are several thousands dead in Haiti, but no cry of genocide from the White House, no cry of genocide from Congress. And the lunacy continues in Haiti because what's lost on a lot of people is the history of Haiti. Very intriguing if you ever take the time to understand the significance of the Haitian Revolution and how that impacts the United States and how the United States has thanked Haiti for what it has done by keeping it destabilized. All that being said is for those of you who care to care, the destabilization, I would dare to say the violence that we now see in Haiti that nobody is taking the time, at least in mass media, we talk about it here, is a direct result of what France and the United States have done to destabilize the country of Haiti, the first African country, and I call it African country, to earn its freedom from colonization from the French in 1804. The reason that's important to American history is because of this war between very little trained Africans who were enslaved in winning their independence from, at that time, the greatest military arsenal in the world, that being France. We're talking about the late 1700s. It started in 1791. There was this thing called the Louisiana Purchase. Wars cost a lot of money, trillions now. Napoleon Bonaparte, considered to be one of the greatest military generals in history, had to sell a large segment of land in the United States that literally doubled the size of the United States, called the Louisiana Purchase. Haiti is directly responsible for that. How does it get repaid? France stated that Haiti would never know peace, and they literally have not known any peace. The Africans who were enslaved there were forced to pay reparations once they achieved their freedom. They were forced to pay reparations, and they were the enslaved. And since then, there has never really been a solid sense of peace among the people there. The European powers, that includes the United States, have inserted leaders there that have forced the people to suffer. France, of course, got its reparations back. That was paid off in the 20th century. But Haiti, as a result, has remained poor. And those leaders who have begun to fight on behalf of the people were removed or assassinated. We talked about Joyce Moselle, who was murdered in 2023 by mercenaries. But who hired the mercenaries? Who was involved indirectly? Do the research. It's a very interesting story. But I hail and I continue to advocate for Haiti because they had a global impact on not just the United States, but those who fight for freedom all over the world. We continue to pray, we continue to fight, but we need to fight by talking to people who represent us in Washington, D.C., so that they can get the support, they can get the suffrage that other countries are getting. This is also important because as we send so many hundreds of millions of dollars to the Middle East, hundreds of millions of dollars to Europe, we send practically nothing to Haiti. But what we did do is send 300 police officers from Kenya who've done nothing to destabilize the issue because they're not capable of doing that. And what we have to ask for is for those who've been in the way to get out of the way. To get out of the way. Let them control their own destiny. We understand that other countries want the resources that are there in Haiti because Haiti does have resources. However, get out of the way. They want to control their destiny just like every other country does. And so we'll continue to fight. We'll continue to advocate. And we'll continue to do whatever it takes to make sure that we have a clear understanding that freedom is for everybody, not just for the privileged few. So we continue to fight the fight for Haiti, continue to fight the fight for those who are suffering all over the world. And so, folks, last story for the day, and I'm pretty sure that many of you have already seen this, but unemployment within the Black community nationwide is at its highest levels since COVID, since the pandemic. According to the most recent jobs report from the Labor Department, the unemployment rate for African Americans climbed to 7.2% in July, the highest since the pandemic era. The most recent surge followed an eye-popping 13% increase from May to June. Black women in particular have seen a dramatic increase in unemployment over the past year, from 5.5% to 6.3%, an increase of over 15% in the last year. Economists are saying the unemployment surge for African Americans could be a troubling sign for the economy, however, as African Americans are usually a first hit by economic downturns in the country. Other ethnic groups are also seeing effects of a weakening labor market. The Black unemployment rate is always the first to go up. That's always the canary in the coal mine, said chief economist at the Nonpartisan Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. Overall, Black Americans account for 18% of the federal workforce, however, hugely cut by, of course, Trump's Federal Reserve or federal workforce cuts, including DOGE, so-called a department that never existed by Elon Musk. Compared with 12% of the overall workforce, Black employees make up an even larger share of some of the agencies that have seen some of the deepest job cuts, like the Department of Education, where blacks, African Americans, represent 36% of the workforce, gutted by the White House this year, in addition to Health and Human Resources, in which African Americans make up 20% of the workforce, even though we are 12% of the population. Black women make up roughly 12% of the federal workforce overall, twice their participation in the civilian workforce. The Labor Department report shows that more than 300,000 Black women lost their jobs in the first half of 2025. Recent graduates have also struggled to find work amid the rise of artificial intelligence and business uncertainty related to tariffs. Overall, U.S. employees added 73,000 jobs in July, below the $105,000 economists had expected. One of the reasons why the chief of the Bureau of Labor Statistics was recently fired. The numbers weren't high enough, regardless of what they were. However, what we need to understand is that the unemployment rate for African Americans in the U.S. has historically been significantly higher than for their white counterparts. Data collected by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics since 1972 is that the Black unemployment rate has been about twice that of their white counterparts for most of that period, which holds true across demographics, various demographics, including gender, age, and veteran status. Therefore, the Black-white unemployment gap has remained relatively consistent for decades. The reason this is a problem is because there was a saying a long time ago that when they sneeze uptown, the Black community gets a flu. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the economy over the next several months. Now, this is an interesting point for those of you who might ask, well, okay, what does it look like overall in terms of Black unemployment? We know it's twice that of white, but when was the worst unemployment rate? Well, I have the data. It was 1983. If we look at this map, this is where we were at. And depending on where we're going at with the economy and in the world, typically there we go. By the way, who was president in 1983? That would be one Ronald Wilson Reagan. And I remember that because I was in high school and in college during the Reagan years. And I remember people talking about post-fact, the great Reagan years, and all I remember was a recession and having a very hard time finding a job. What's the message here? The message here is we currently have someone who is implementing policies from the White House that disproportionately affect those who are the least employed, who in probably the best case scenario are working class Americans and are poor. Now, given the conversation that we've already had of the OBBBA, you can call it what you want, but it does benefit a lot of folks who do pretty well in the market. It does definitely have some tax benefits, and there definitely are some things that are going to help folks. But given the amount of money that we're going to pay for the tax cuts that have been made permanent, and the cost of this new spending bill, which is about $3 trillion, there are a lot of folks who are going to get hurt by this. Some of them are college age, because what this bill has done is cut funding for Pell Grant and, to a certain degree, how much you can get school loans for college for folks who are trying to make a future. Of course, it is also hurting folks who are probably the working poor, who need expanded health care benefits, and that's getting cut as well. Something called Medicaid, which someone promised they were not going to cut, but it got touched. So we will see what happens, and we will continue to track this. But all that being said, whether you are someone who reaches to your local, state, or federal congressman, this is the time, if you've never done it before, to make sure that your voice is heard. Because there are some folks who are doing extremely well, who will continue to do well, but there are a lot of folks out there who are hurting, who are jobless. Our community is disproportionately impacted, as it always has been. And you have to continue to vote and work for your interests. vote, and work for your interests. And we see what's happening. Continue to make sure that, one, we are not completely dependent on other folks supporting the employment of our community. We are the least likely, that is the Black community, to employ ourselves, and the most likely to be broke. It's just a fact. We are the least likely to employ ourselves and the most likely to be broke. Where's the evidence? We have done plenty of shows talking about the average net worth among all communities. Asians are at the top of the food chain. Caucasian Americans, East Indians, Latin Americans, and then African Americans. The facts are the facts. What we do have to do is we have to build our own economies. We have to collaborate and partner to build more businesses that will employ our own people so that we are not completely dependent on other communities. And we have to put our money where our mouth is. What does that mean? What that means is you spend your money with people who appreciate you. You cannot avoid taxes unless you want to go to jail. But spend money with businesses and people who appreciate you and who reinvest in your community. If they don't do that, I don't know what you're doing. If you don't spend money and invest with folks who appreciate you and show your worth and their value to you, which says a lot, Google, which says a lot, Target, which says a lot, Walmart, then what are you doing? What are we doing? To be continued, because we are now out of time. We want to thank everybody who joined. We want to thank everybody for their comments. And of course, we will see you next week at 8 p.m. Central Time, because if it is Wednesday night, it is definitely Black Men Speak. We want to thank everyone and, of course, wish you a great rest of the week.